It's the summer of 1890 in Nevers, France, a suburb about 27 kilometers from the center of Paris. An artist works on capturing a scene of evening light on the front of a white house. This artist, Vincent van Gogh, does not capture the scene quite as the human eyes normally would. Van Gogh's style includes highlighting colors and objects normally looked over in everyday life, such as celestial objects and streaks of bright color. His unique way of interpreting the world developed during his years in Paris, where his color palette branched from the dull, earthy tones of Dutch art to the vibrant palette of the Impressionists. He began pulling from the trending Japanese art swirling around Paris at the time, including Japanese-styled clothing and landscapes. He rarely ever painted perfect or exalted buildings or terrains. Instead, his scenes were usually of everyday life and the struggles and imperfections that come along with it. For example, his first majorly successful work of art was Potato Eaters, portraying a family of potato farmers with protruding cheekbones and bony hands eating their day's harvest. However, Van Gogh manages to make the scene feel welcoming and homey. He is portraying what many citizens of Europe live like, instead of a luxurious lifestyle, to prove that money and objects don't affect a family's happiness. Eventually, Van Gogh became overwhelmed in the city, so he moved out to Arles in southern France where there was more fresh air. This period in Van Gogh's life became hopeful, and the new location inspired him to paint again. This period did not last long, though. His mental health started to decline again, and he was admitted into multiple mental hospitals, where he documented his stay with more paintings. He eventually couldn't handle the pressure of life and committed suicide. About 6 weeks before he did, he painted this. This painting, White House at Night, was painted later in his life after he had solidified his painting style that we recognize today. It depicts a normal summer evening, but it is not as colorful as his paintings typically are. What is happening in the scene is not important, but what is highlighted or hidden within plain sight is what makes Van Gogh's paintings so unique and riveting. The windows on the bottom floor of the house are painted orange and yellow, making the house seem warm and inviting. But then, the top floor's windows are shuttered dark or red, revealing it is not as welcome as it seems. The woman walking across the front seems ordinary at first glance, but she is wearing all black with a sharp object in her right hand and a sickle-shaped object in her left. It is almost like Van Gogh is representing the Grim Reaper, who also wears a black cloak and carries a scythe, a tool like the sickle that is used to harvest crops. Going back to the house, the dimensions are all straight lines with nothing special about the architecture, and it seems practical and cost-effective like a prison. With the red windows on the top floor and the prison-like architecture, Van Gogh seems to be depicting the house as the entrance to hell, with the Grim Reaper heading out to reap more souls. The only clear sign of hope in this painting is the celestial object in the top right corner, which has been researched by an honors college class from the Southwest Texas State University. They did so by looking back on weather and astronomy records from June of 1890, and it was found to be the planet Venus painted on the exact date of June 16th. Its position in the sky above the entrance to hell indicates that it is a heavenly object, or the entrance to heaven itself. But in Van Gogh's perspective, the Grim Reaper and the entrance to hell seem much closer than heaven, and they stand in his way of getting there. Not all his paintings are this dark or morbid. It was just this time in his life that he was having harmful thoughts and would integrate them into his paintings as a way of coping. 40 years later, in the 1930s, in a world with a wider knowledge and appreciation for art and ideas, there were those who wished to demonize the abstract and modern art style like Van Gogh's. Specifically, it was the Nazi Party, who wanted nothing to do with art that was not classical or ideal to their vision of a perfect society. Any art or literature that did not fall into that strict category was either destroyed or labeled as degenerate art, mocked and ridiculed by the Nazis till everyone saw it as less than dirt. However, Germany was not the only country that lost a lot of artistic cultural value in the early 20th century. When the Bolshevik Party took over and turned Russia into the Soviet Union in 1922, they did not destroy or censor literature and forms of art as much as the Nazi Party did, although there weren't many modern paintings created during the Bolshevik control. Many citizens were just cut off from the rest of the world and the evolution of art throughout the 20th century. Many of them also did not have time to appreciate art while they were focused on staying alive and off the secret police's radar. It wasn't until after the Cold War and the fall of the Bolshevik control in 1991 that citizens were exposed to other cultures than their own. Russia slowly began to integrate a more diverse style of artwork into their museum systems, including French works by Vincent van Gogh. But the way some of this art was obtained was questionable. When the Soviet Union began invading Germany and defeating the Nazi Party, designated art professionals called trophy brigades would search caves, cellars, and towers for works of art listed to steal. The reasoning was that they were taking back in equal value what the Germans stole from them when they invaded their land. The trophy brigades weren't the only ones in the army that stole art. Normal soldiers would steal art from private collections they came across if they seemed valuable. One example is the private collection of Otto Krebs in the Holsdorf Manor, located in Thuringia, Germany. His collection consisted of modern and post-impressionist paintings, one of them being White House at Night by Vincent van Gogh. Before World War II, Otto Krebs would go to work business in Heidelberg, Germany, and would stop every now and then at the manor on the way. His art collection there was a valuable one, but only taken out on the days that he visited, meaning they were only out of the storerooms a few weeks out of the year. Great works of art by widely recognized artists were wasting away in the manor, only being viewed and appreciated a few times out of the year. When the Nazi Party came to power and labeled modern art degenerate, Otto Krebs made sure to keep his collection even more hidden, although not many people knew about it in the first place. Before the end of the war and the fall of the Nazi Party, Otto Krebs died, leaving his property to his widow. She would visit the property with friends and use it as a retreat to escape the war-torn city and bombings for a few days. When the Allied army came through Thuringia, they encountered the manor and some of the art within it. They asked the chief of the Weimar Museum if the art should be taken back with them to Western Europe, since it clearly was not German art and could have been stolen, but all the art in the collection was legally acquired and did not even belong to the museum. In the end, the Allied army left without touching the art, but that was not the case when the Soviet army came through. The manor was occupied by the Soviets in 1949 after the Allies had won and left Germany. They used the manor to house high-ranking officers while exploring the area. When the Soviets left, no one in the manor or the town tried to stop the Soviets from taking the art, mainly because they didn't even know the full extent of its existence within the manor. It is not known exactly where the art was taken first or what stops it made on the way, but the collection eventually ended up in the basement storage of the State Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. Some of the art from the collection was displayed in the 19th and 20th century French art exhibition in 1995 and is still on display today. With the stolen art on display now, there are many who question who the art rightly belongs to and where works like White House at Night should go now. White House at Night by Vincent van Gogh and other works of art from the same collection should remain at the Hermitage Museum because its post-impressionist and abstract style will be more valuable in Russia's traditional society than in a private German collection. There are extenuating circumstances surrounding every work of art, such as White House at Night, and how no one tried to stop the soldiers when they took the entire collection. Each case of stolen art is different and needs to be analyzed individually. When the Russian Federation became an independent state and the Soviet Union collapsed, the new government completely removed all censorship on artistic and cultural preservation and development. But after decades of not having any form of freedom of expression or creativity, the field of artists was lacking. It took a whole decade after the fall of the Soviet Union for the art field to start developing again. Even now in 2018, most of the working population grew up in a country that did not allow the creation of anything individualized or thoughtful, so the art in Russia is mainly created by young artists who have been exposed to diverse forms of art. The importance of having works of art like Van Gogh's is paramount because it diversifies the thoughts and culture of future Russia through the younger generations. It cannot do that from a private collection in Germany where only select few people would appreciate the value and importance of diverse art. White House at Night and other works like it will serve more of a purpose in the State Hermitage Museum where young and impressionable people can view and be inspired by the great artistry to take a step towards loosening their rigid and inflexible society.